our podcast. The name of our podcast is Save It, Spend It, Share It. And we're very excited to start our episode today with a special guest. And we have our guest, Elder Rudy Salazar. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Kathleen, for inviting me. I'm very glad that you did.
I'm very excited to see everything that we're going to be able to hear from you and learn from experiences. And I'm very excited. So thank you very much for being with us today. The title of our podcast today, it's The Basics of Budgeting. Wow. It's going to be, I think, very interesting to hear about budgets. So don't worry about it. If you don't have a budget or you don't know what a budget is, don't worry about it. We'll discover some basics today and help you get started. So why don't we get started?
Sure.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Praise the Lord. Thank you that you invited me to Southern California, here in Glendale, California. Beautiful day.
It is. The weather has been amazing. We've had a great sun, and I love the sun. What about you, Michelle?
I do love the sun. I do get sunburned easily, so I try to stay away, but I love the warmth.
Yeah, we've been very blessed. But where do you live?
I live in Maryland, in
okay.
Columbia, Maryland.
Okay.
So it is still cold. I talked to my wife last night, and she was saying that, yes, it was kind of still cold weather. But it definitely, I think spring is in the air, and it's definitely not as, we haven't had a snow in a while, and the lake already is not frozen anymore.
Oh, great. Yeah. So you're going to go back to cold weather, so enjoy the sunny days here.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what you do.
I am the Associate Director for the Stewardship Department of the North American Division. And so my job is to promote stewardship around the North American Division of the Seventh-day Adventists.
Oh, wow. So you must be very busy throughout the year.
Yes. I'm invited to go to conventions, camp meetings, and churches, and do some video, and also we are producing a lot of materials, printed materials for the North American Division for pastors and lay people.
Oh, wow. So I can hear all of these activities that you're doing, so you must be very busy. And when do you find time to accomplish some of your goals? I don't know if you set some goals for the new year, for example, in your personal life. How do you manage that time balance?
Well, sometimes for example, truly I skip a meal or lunch and say, you know what, if I eat lunch and then I don't want to go to the gym, so I'm just going to have an apple, and I go and do my running on the treadmill. I go to the gym. So sometimes I just have to eat a little lunch and then go to the gym, and then come back, take a shower, come back to the office, and continue working. The gym is really close to my office.
Oh, that helps.
Yeah.
That helps. Keeping track of our goals, it needs to be kind of like very intentional. This year I started counting my steps for the first time in a long time. And at the beginning that I started counting my steps, I discovered that I was walking less than 1,500 steps a day. So basically I was not moving. I was not moving at all. And then I started setting goals. I want to increase my steps to 3,000 steps. I want to increase to 4,000 steps. But I had to be very intentional, have it in my mind constantly, being reminded, you have to do this. Do you think that sometimes setting goals come natural, or how do we develop those kind of working towards the goals?
Well, you probably have to put a structure to your life in order to set those goals and say, okay, I'm going to do this every day. Like for my wife, talking about steps, we say, okay, we're going to go, we live around a lake, and we walk those 2 miles every day. And if the weather is too cold, then we go to the mall and we walk out, we put our steps. and you have to be intentional, and you have to build it into your daily schedule.
I see. So you always stick to the plan, kind of, you work around that goal and then you stick to a specific plan.
And that's right. Yes, you do have to stick to that plan. Otherwise, it'll never happen. If you don't make it happen, no one is going to make it happen for you.
So if we're talking about goals, how can we adapt a financial goal into our lives? And sometimes most of the time when we're considering goals, we're thinking, oh, this year I'm going to go to the gym. This year I'm going to eat healthier. This year I'm going to finish my education. But how many times have we also structured our goals around financially expectations that we have for this year? And, as I was thinking about it, I don't know if we have a reference in the Bible that talks about developing a plan towards budgeting.
Yes, indeed. And let me tell you that many times we think that the Bible is just about spiritual things, that it's all about my spiritual life and my heart, that money has nothing to do with my Christian walk. But there is a lot of Bible verses in the Old Testament, New Testament that deal with our financial lives. In Jesus, in many of his parables, he talks about money. And even there is a passage that stands out in my mind in Luke 14, verses 28 to 30. And it says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower," this is Jesus' words, "does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish it." Wow. So here you have a situation where a man was actually spending his money to build a tower.
Yeah.
But he did not count the cost. And then at the end, he couldn't finish the job. And everybody was mocking him because he did not make a budget for that, building his tower.
Yeah. I think sometimes we like to run numbers in our head.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people that are like great at mental math and calculating the cost. But when we write it down, it kind of gives us perspective of things that maybe we're missing, some of the costs that are hitting, some of the costs that we had not expected, and kind of put into a plan of how much will it actually cost to develop this project.
That's right. I think that I don't want to get off the subject, but it's writing something. I have noticed that I get a lot more out of my Bible reading when I begin to write what God has spoke to me in my devotional time with God. And so truly writing something, it does something in your brain that engages everything. And then that writing, you begin to count the cost. Yeah. When you put it on paper, all your expenses, it's amazing that you begin to realize, I didn't know all the expenses that I have during the month. It doesn't happen until you write it down.
That's true. And, we also have references in the Bible of writing. The 10 Commandments.
Yes.
They were written.
Yes.
There is something about putting in writing so you can follow a guideline or something structured. Mm-hmm. It's not only that we kind of run numbers in our head, but actually something that we can develop a plan and work towards it. So I think it's a great way of starting our budget.
Yes, and let me just put a little parenthesis here that I don't know if you knew that the kings of Israel were instructed to write the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Mm-hmm. They were told that every king should write on their own writing the 5 books of the Bible. So there is power to you sitting down and writing down or typing down what is happening with your budget, your expenses, and the way that you're spending your money.
Great. So today we're talking with Elder Rudy Salazar about the basics of budgeting. And if you just joined us, you know, this is the place where you're going to find small solutions on how to budget. Where do you start? You know, right now we're talking about developing a plan, but some of us, maybe we don't even know where to start. Okay, so the first thing we have is we need to write it down. So now, what am I going to write down?
Well, first of all, you need to say, okay, what is your income? And so you have to realize, okay, and you need to be honest with yourself and say, okay, this is not the best case scenario, but what is my worst case scenario, especially if you have an income stream that is not sure? I'll say, what is my income? And you need to think about what is the income for the whole family, the wife and the husband, and you put it down, and then you sit down and say, okay, what are our expenses? So you need to sit down together as a husband and wife and sit down and count the cost. What is it that we're doing every month? How we're spending the money?
Yeah. And now that you're talking about sitting down, it's hard being honest to ourselves. Sometimes we want to deceive ourselves thinking, oh, I don't spend that much money buying this drink, or I don't spend that much money in shoes. But we're kind of deceiving ourselves.
Yeah.
Because once we start writing, then we start noticing, oh, I didn't realize I had spent so much money in this item. There's an ad that I've seen on social media that they ask people, how much do you spend on this subscription? How much do you spend a month in groceries? And most of the people respond, oh, not that much. I only have one subscription. And then all of a sudden they say, well, we actually analyze your accounts and you have 5 different subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And we think, oh, that happens to them, not to me. But in reality, we all have those hidden expenses that are kind of eating our income, but we don't even know about. So it's a little hard being honest to ourselves and kind of showing ourselves, this is where you're spending your money. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you started budgeting?
Well, there was a time in our lives with my wife that we were living the American dream, and we bought a home, we bought brand new cars, and of course that home had to have brand new furniture, and we would take vacations, and we would go skiing at Lake Tahoe, we would go snorkeling in Mexico, and so we were living the abundant life, the good life, but we were living it on credit. So we were just, hey, we owe the cars, we owe the home, we had credit cards, and we were all put it on credit. So we were really up to here in debt. And we were not counting the cost because she was working, I was working, and we were just spending the money. And then my wife became pregnant, and we decided, you know what, we're not going to have a babysitter taking care of our child. My wife is going to stay home. And we thought that with just my pastoral salary, with the minister's salary, we were going to able to make it. And we could have made it if we were not, up to our neck in debt. But because we were so much in debt and we have all these credit cards and all of these other, old furniture and cars and everything else, that we realized we cannot make it. And so we had to declare bankruptcy, and that kind of woke us up and shook us up to the point that said, you know what, we need to do something so this doesn't happen to us again. Both professional people declaring bankruptcy because we did not count the cost. So we began to we bought books, we took courses, we began to learn about all of this financial management. And one of the first things that every management book is, financial management, is count the cost. You need to have a budget. And we begin to realize and put into practice all of this, what we're talking about today. And that's when we realize how we did not know how to budget things and how we were spending the money. We had no idea how much we were spending and eating out until we started counting the cost and keeping all the receipts, that we realized
Wow.
we need to eat at home more than we go out to eat. But it's until you begin to count the cost that you realize and you begin to budget, that it gives you a true picture of where the money is going.
I see. So, when you started the journey, both of you were in agreement.
Yes.
You and your wife were in agreement of saying, we need to make a change.
Yes, we realize that we need to be together on this, because if we're gonna make cuts, it's not her saying, okay, we're gonna do this, or I'm gonna tell her what to do. But we realize we're in this thing together. We want to make sure that we know how to manage our finances well, but it's best to work together, so that whenever you make a decision, okay, we're gonna cut the cable, we're gonna cut this, we're gonna cut that. And one of the things we realized, we need to let go of the house, because we cannot afford the house.
And that
we
was
have.
tough.
And it was tough, and we went to living in a small apartment, and that's okay, because we want to make sure that we stay within our budget.
I see.
But we both had to make the decision to say, let's leave the house and go back to an apartment.
Well, that is great, of hearing how both of you were engaged in a plan and collaborated towards one goal, which I think was very successful, because both of you had the same goal in mind. And while you were looking for, I believe, I would believe that you went through different classes, different approaches. Which one is the one that you like the best?
Well, one of the things that we did is we took the one course from Financial Crown from Larry Burkett. Larry Burkett has a lot of material. Rest in peace now, but he was really instrumental. He had a lot of financial management courses, and we were eating up all that up. We were really, getting all that information and reading books and materials and taking classes, so that we can learn better to manage our money.
So you educated yourself in something that you were trying to look for answers. It didn't come just easily or natural in saying, okay, let's now work it out. You were proactive in looking out for answers. What can we do to improve our current situation?
That's right. Yes.
Now, did your income all of a sudden increased? Or it was just, or you discovered that it was only a way of managing better your finances?
Yeah, no, it definitely, the turning point in our financial lives is the issue of budgeting.
Okay.
Because once we budgeted, we realized that our priorities, we were spending too much money on vacations. We were spending too much money on eating out. And at that point, we said, okay, we need to cut a lot of those expenses. But again, until you count the cost, you don't know how you're spending your money. And many times you don't want to change your lifestyle until you realize how it's impacting your enjoyment of life.
Yes.
Because you're, having a huge debt can put a burden on you that it can be strenuous. And a lot of marriages end up in
Yes.
divorce because of finances, and couples have a lot of fighting because of money. Money
Yeah, of
issues
course.
is a big issue with a lot of couples. So, matter of fact, it's one of the main issues with Christian couples.
Oh, wow.
Is really the problem is their finances, because they're not in one accord. in their finances, and so they're fighting all the time. And I think some of that comes because they don't have a budget they both of them agree on the budget, and they both embrace and work to those goals to pay off all those debts.
Wow. Well, I'm fascinated with what you just said and how both of you were able to find a solution for your problem and stick to a plan. Because that is very hard to be able to stick to a plan. Once you have certain way of living, you basically have to shift completely from where you are and stick to a different plan, to a different model. So why don't we talk a little bit about some models where we could start? Because we already know that we have a problem. We know that we need to develop a plan. We know that we need to have a budget. And I thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. Now I want to go a little bit about, okay, I'm right now ready to make changes. What are some models out there that I can start exploring when it comes to budgeting?
Yeah, let me share with you. I think it would be very good for our audience to hear some quotes from some people about the importance of budgeting. And Barack Obama, he said, a budget is more than numbers on a paper. It is the embodiment of our values.
Wow.
So a budget tells you what you value the most.
Mm-hmm. What's inside you.
What's inside you.
Wow.
What you value and what you're spending your money on tells what you value. Mm-hmm. So a budget, it's really your values on paper. Warren Buffett said, "Do not say what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving."
Wow, amazing. I've been fascinated. Everything that I've been listening to, it's been amazing about having a plan, developing, sitting down to actually develop the plan. And I think, after hearing your experiences, we have been able to establish where do we start, right? We already know that we have a problem, that we need to look for a solution. So why don't I invite you one more time to be with us? Would you be able to come back to another episode?
Yes.
So next time you're here, I want to hear about what models of budgeting we have, how can we develop the plan, and we can dive into the actual execution of the plan. So it would be great having you back. Thank you so much for being with us today. It has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you, Kathleen, for inviting me, and I'm glad to share this because I'm so excited that you're doing this podcast because I know a lot of people will be blessed to listen to it, to watch it, because I know some people it's going to resonate and they will put it into practice.
Yeah, so thank you again for being with us. And we hope to see you again for our second episode about budgeting. Today we were talking about the basics of budgeting, and we'll come back for a second episode about how to execute a budget. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.